Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Drabinski, and I'm a Rockstar coach here with Ideas on Fire. And I'm glad so many of you can join us for today's webinar on setting your writing routine. Uh, I'm recovering from the flu, so if I go into a coughing fit, please be patient with me. I've got some water and seltzer, so hopefully that will work out. And I don't think I can give it to you over the webinar. Anyway, I'll go through the PowerPoint slides here in a minute, and as we go, I won't be able to see what you're typing in the column on the side, but you'll be able to chat with each other. And when at the end of the webinar, I'll come back and we can have a conversation there. So I'll go ahead and get us started. One moment. You might also see my cat at some point in today's. Okay. All right. So today's webinar is on setting your writing routine. And if I'm being honest, a lot of what we'll go over today is stuff that you've already thought about. I found that when we talk about and think about how to set our writing routine, it's often we need to be reminded of how important it is and some strategies to get started. And here, as we enter February, I think it's a good time to stop and step back and think about what it means to have a routine. So what's on tap for today? We're going to start by talking about why setting a routine matters. And then we'll spend a minute talking about how to think through this question, what kind of writer are you? I think a lot of us think we're a certain kind of writer who needs a certain kind of thing to write well. And I want to talk about that a little today. Then we'll discuss what counts as writing and what counts as routine, which are important things to think about as we set up these writing routines. And then I'll go over two sort of basic strategies for setting routines. One, writing in timed routines. We'll talk about a lot of us write in palms or in sort of chunks of time and how to do that. And then also how to think about writing in page or word count routines. And there are benefits to both of these strategies, but these are the sort of two basic strategies to get us in a writing routine, writing regularly and producing the pages that we need to get through our work. We'll also talk about accountability systems. And I think this is probably the most important part of setting a writing routine. Writing routines work when they become routine, obviously. And one of the ways they do that is by making us accountable to ourselves. And sometimes that's hard. That's not quite enough. And we need to be accountable to others. So we'll talk about some accountability systems we might use to make sure our writing routines stick. And then I'll end with a list of some other resources, some from Ideas on Fire and some from elsewhere that can get us inspired to stay in these routines once we get in them. All right, so let's talk about why setting a writing routine matters. These things are pretty clear. First, practice makes better. And this is true in all areas of life, and writing, it's true in writing as well. When we write regularly, our writing muscles are stronger. And when we sit down every day, we start to actually just write instead of all that time that we all are used to, where we spend about to write, but then needing to check Facebook, about to write, but then needing to make sure that we fed the cat, whatever. When we get in the practice of writing, it gets easier over time. And this is just true. From my own experience, writing on a daily blog, it seemed when I started doing it as a way to avoid the dissertation, and maybe it was, but at the same time, it got me writing every day, which made writing the dissertation easier. And then I started to write that every day, and I eventually finished in 6 months what I'd been spending 3 years trying to write. So having a routine gets you in the regularity of moving those muscles and really practicing. Setting a routine is also important because, let's face it, when it comes to writing, there's always something better to do. There's always something that takes the place of it. Writing, even for those of us for whom this is essential to our professional success, writing is the thing that matters. It's what gets us out of grad school. It's what gets us the job, what keeps us the job. Writing is often the first thing to fall off the list because it matters in the immediacy only to us, and teaching matters to students, and care work matters to partners, and bill paying matters to our sense of owing the world things. So if you have a routine, then the writing is much more likely to happen, and those better things don't get in the way. A routine is also helpful because it can itself be a kind of accountability. Once you are in a routine, you feel like you owe yourself that routine, and it becomes its own sort of self-fulfilling accountability. Um, and then setting a routine matters. I'm going to go to these points out of order because I think they're out of order. It matters because it gets work done. Uh, a lot of times, the seminar paper can be written in a couple of all night binges, maybe, but the dissertation can't be. It just doesn't work that way. Um, so, getting a sort of larger projects done absolutely demands our daily writing practice or regular writing practice. And the only way to do that is to set this routine. And then finally, I think that setting a writing routine matters because it helps us build the intellectual life that we're here for. And that's something that's easy to forget uh, in the hustle bustle of the everyday and the sort of constant stresses on us to write or to produce all these different things. But writing regularly is how we come to know things, right? It's how we learn, and it's how we engage ourselves in our own intellectual life. And too often that's shortchanged, even when that's our full time job. So setting a writing routine really matters, and it's exciting to do that. So I want to take a second to talk about what kind of writer we think we are, and I write this from my own experience of being a kind of writer who could only write in long stretches of uninterrupted time. Is that you? Are you the type of writer who needs like hours? I can only write in these huge chunks. Um, or are you the type of writer who can only write in the mornings, or you can only write in the evenings, or you can only write with complete silence, things like this. A lot of us, I think, have an idea of ourselves as a type of person who does things in a type of way. But life often puts up these big roadblocks and says, okay, you might be the type of person who can only write in long stretches of uninterrupted time, but I'm not going to give you any of those. We might fantasize we can do all our writing in the summertime, but that's not going to be sufficient, especially when the summer gets all filled up with other stuff too. Um, Sometimes every time we get to fall break around Thanksgiving, I think, oh, this is the long weekend where I'll get a lot of work done. And then I laugh to myself because I've been thinking that would be the case since college, and I never get anything done right in that time. So uh, it's very rare to have long stretches of uninterrupted time. And if we want to set a writing routine, we have to recognize that those are the limits of the outside world, and become a different kind of person. Writing in the mornings. You get assigned a morning class. There you go. Complete silence. They've been doing road work outside my house for the last 3 weeks. Just rattles of, I have no control over that. These things are in our world. We have to build, or we have to sort of adjust to them. And I think it's really damaging to us when we think we are a type of writer who can only write in a certain way. We do have the ability to change our practices and habits, and that's a really good thing. And we can build writing routines that work with the way our lives are set up, rather than always being in competition with them. Uh, One of the most sort of deadly threats to our writing styles, I think, is this idea that I can only write on a deadline. And deadline writing works somewhat, right? A lot of us are like that. I definitely produce the thing by the deadline because I'm a well trained student and worker bee. But that's dangerous when you're working on larger projects like books or dissertations when there isn't a single deadline. And if you only work right on a deadline, chances are you're not going to produce the pages you need by that time. So, um, deadline writing is sort of dangerous. Also, once you miss a deadline, it's dangerous to see how little consequence there can be of missing a deadline, and then those deadlines stop um, doing that function either. So, in setting your writing routine, I want to encourage all of us to think about becoming the writer our schedules demand that we become. Uh, as increased work demands pile upon us, we have to figure out how to write in those interstices of time and how to understand that that kind of writing counts, right? That we can write in 25-minute increments. You can grab 15 minutes in the morning, produce 100 words, and leave yourself a breadcrumb for later, right? There isn't a type of writer who you are. The writing routine will The idea is to get it to work with the life that you already have, and then you'll become the writer for whom that routine works. So, what counts as writing? Excuse me. When you're setting out to set a writing routine, I think it's really important to reflect on what you're going to count as writing. And putting words on the page definitely counts. So, a lot of people call this zero drafting, like just getting as many words on a page as you can. That doesn't matter what they are, just keep writing. Strategies like don't lift your pencil up, don't lift your pen up, which doesn't really work because most of us are typing at this point. But that kind of writing absolutely counts as writing. Now, it's up to you if you think of these other things as writing. I do, because for me, all of it goes into the writing process, and that's what I'm trying to prioritize in my routine. So, research, uh, doing your doing research, going to the library, picking up articles, um, reading, which is a really sort of sometimes I'm shocked at how little reading seems to get done by a lot of us. This is an essential part of writing. We can't write without it. Editing, this is often the scary work. For me anyway, the zero draft is almost easy compared to the having to go back in and revise and edit. And revision and editing tasks are absolutely writing. These are all parts of the writing process. So when you're thinking about your routine and setting a schedule that'll work for you, remember to carve out time for all of these sort of stages of writing. And one thing I'll say is should always stay separate from writing is email, because that's not writing. That's a lot of writing words on a computer screen, but it's not the writing we're talking about. But all of these things count as writing, and I think it's important when setting a writing routine and setting yourself up for success to understand that all of this, you have to find time for all of this in that writing routine. Now, there are a couple of different ways, I think, to think about the type of routine you want. One is daily writing, and I think this the is a really good strategy for making sure that you write regularly. So some people have a write every day routine. Personally, I have a write 5 days a week routine because I take the weekends off from work, and writing to me is work. As I tell my students, people have fought and died for the right to weekends, and I want to honor that martyrdom. So I do think, though, that a daily writing routine um, is the practice that is easiest to get in place and make routine over time and like turn into a habit, and is the most likely to produce work, which is ultimately our goal with our writing routine. You can also set a routine based on hours per week that you work. So maybe you want to produce a certain number of pages a week. And this is a good way to schedule it if, say, you're an adjunct and you're teaching at 4 different places, and you've got all these classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Maybe those days you won't be doing writing, and so you'll write in the other days of the week. So you can also set a routine that's based on hours per week. I just want to encourage you to make sure that multiple days a week are spent out with writing to really make it routine. You can also set a routine that's based on your goal. Like, I want to produce this many pages. Like, I want to produce 10 pages a week. So I write all 10 pages on Monday. I take the rest of the week off. So that's another way of setting a routine. I think, again, the daily writing routine is the one that's most likely to stick and the least likely to find excuses to not do it, right? So the daily writing routine, I think, is often the best, but it's up to you sort of what works best in terms of setting a routine. Again, be realistic with the rest of your schedule, but don't think that because you only have a half an hour free on a day that you can't get some writing done. So those are some sort of basic things to think about when just deciding how to set up your writing routine. So I want to first talk about writing in timed routines, and this is writing in chunks of time. And I just had sort of a few things I want to discuss here. And again, a lot of these are things that you've already thought about, but it's good to remind yourself of them and take them seriously as you sort of set your routine. For writing in timed routines, writing the same time, same place every day can be really helpful, right? The same way that, like, I floss my teeth every single night at a certain time, right? It's a routine. I just do it. I don't question it. If you have something that's sort of built into the schedule at the same time every day, then you just show up for it. This requires you to be really honest about your schedule, though, and how much time it takes you to do other things in your life. One moment, need some water. This flu kicked your butt. Okay, so you want to be honest about your schedule, but find a time or a place. Find a time in your calendar every day when you can write. It doesn't have to be the same time, but it needs to be a set time every day. Your writing has to be as important as any other meeting. And I think this is the most important key to setting your writing routine. There are things that we would not dream up for, right? Like we show up for teaching no matter what. A lot of us will be down with some serious disease and still like force ourselves in front of the classroom for an hour. We would never dream of missing it because it's just, we have to do it. It's on our schedule. You have to convince yourself that your timed writing is that important, that you show up for yourself in that way every day. Um, uh, and I think that's a mind trick that you just have to keep reminding yourself of. What is my priority here? Is it me and my ideas, or is it something else? It's got to be you and your ideas. And again, I think the reason that it's so easy to let writing be the thing that slips away is because it's often the hardest. It's where we're the most vulnerable. Uh, it's kind of a scary part of our schedule, and and it's lonely, right? We're often writing by ourselves. So there are a lot of things we got to think about, but sort of making writing the most important meeting of the day is key to a timed routine writing schedule working. It's also really important to build in some ramp up and ramp down time into our routines. If so, so one strategy is I will write for 15 minutes before I check Facebook, for example. You might be the type, though, who needs a ramp in routine. That's like, okay, I know myself, I know that I want to stare at the internet for a second. So I'm going to have 15 minutes, right, of time that I look at the internet, and then I will write for 25 minutes or something like that. So when you look at your schedule for writing, and so let's say you want to write for 25 minutes a day. And that's by the way, good starting routine if you're just getting into one. I'm going to write for 25 minutes a day. If you're going to have a 15-minute ramp up period, and then you're going to need to like tweet about it at the end, then build in an hour for that time. So build that into your calendar schedule. And then actually use a timer. I think this is really important to writing in timed routines. You can use your phone. You can buy a cute alarm. I got a little cute like alarm clock, right? A treat for myself. It says, look, it's my writing alarm, and set that and actually get those minutes in. And so for this kind of routine, you want to set yourself up for success. And there are a couple of ways to do this. First, set yourself some regular benchmarks. One of the dangers of a timed writing routine is that you sit for 25 minutes and nothing happens, and then you're done. And that can be dangerous. So one way to deal with that is to set yourself some benchmarks, like I'm going to produce so many words per week or something like that, and then check in with yourself and make sure you're producing. And you can do that by setting some goals and expectations for yourself. You can't write a dissertation in a week of timed writing, but you can like produce the results section, or I'm going to write the literature review in the next 2 weeks in 25-minute intervals, right? If you actually show up every day for 25 minutes, you will, at the end of those 2 weeks, unbeknownst to you, have produced that section that you needed, right? So set those goals and expectations. And then finally, build in some accountability systems. And we'll talk more about these in a second, but accountability systems where you're checking in maybe with somebody else and making sure that you're actually sticking to the writing routine that you said you would. For some people, my sister, for example, she tweets every day that she wrote. And nobody cares in the Tweetiverse that she wrote, but for her, just having said out loud somewhere that she did her 25 minutes uh, it keeps her accountable. So, oh, and the last thing that's not on this slide, but the last thing I'll say about writing in timed routines, it's there's a wonderful app called Freedom, and I don't make any money for selling it or anything. In fact, I don't know if it costs anything, but it's called Freedom, uh, I'll I'll put this in the notes at the end. But it will shut down your internet for you for certain periods of time. So, like for 25 minutes, you can't open any web pages. If you're not using the web for research while writing, this is a brilliant app because uh, it sort of keeps you accountable to your promise to not tweet but write for 25 minutes. So that can also work as your timer because then it pops, at the end of whatever your interval is, it'll pop up and tell you that you've completed your chunk of time. So that can also be something helpful to both be an accountability and a sort of a blocking system and a timer. Another strategy for routine is to write in page or word count. And I think this is a great strategy if you've got something that you need to produce in a certain period of time. And this works best if you have sort of long and short-term goals. So let's say you have a chapter due to your advisor on March 1st. It's February 5th. Okay, so how many pages a day do you need to write? And given that you need to leave yourself time for revision and editing to get that done, right? So set some interim goals so you have a sense of how many pages a day you should write. If you're writing, just to produce something new, you might not have those clear goals, but it can be helpful if you have something you need to get done to set those benchmarks up in advance. If you're going to write in page or word count routines, you've got to be really realistic about how long it takes you to write. So for some people, writing 2 pages can take 45 minutes. For other people, writing 2 pages can take 12 hours. So this is sort of a danger of the writing in page or word count, but so you want to just be realistic about that when you're calendaring in how much time it would take. You can absolutely combine these strategies, right? I need to write 2 pages a day and I have, 2 timed intervals to do it in or something like that. So you can combine them, but be realistic about how long it takes you to write and assess your progress regularly. Are you producing the kind of pages that you need to meet your goals? So there are a couple of models of this. For this, a lot of people do 2 pages a day. That's about 500 words typed double spaced. So some people say 500 words. That writing is often zero draft writing because 2 pages of polished, revised, edited writing is a lot. But 2 pages of sort of zero drafting, it gets you somewhere, right? But it's not so daunting that you can't do it every day. Another model might be to write an argument a day, or I'm going to work or set a goal like on this day I'm going to work through this problem. When the one sort of issue with this writing routine is you can forget about the other things that you have to do that are part of writing. In a timed writing routine, 25 minutes and this bit of 25 minutes on my writing I'm going to spend researching makes sense. But if you're doing page or word count, make sure you build in time to do those other writing tasks. And then finally, build in accountability systems. That's how routines stick, and that's how they work in the long term. Now, for both of these kinds of writing routines, I would encourage you to do something at the end as you wrap up your 2 pages for the day, or as you wrap up however much time you're going to spend in your time writing routine. And that's leave yourself a breadcrumb for your writing the next day. So at the end of your writing session every day, leave yourself a note about what you're going to do next. So something like, now I want to interpret the Judith Butler quotation or something like that. That is when you sit down the next day and that breadcrumb is there, you don't have to wonder how to start. You just get to start. And once you get in that habit and on a roll, you'll find that you ramp back up into your writing every day in a much easier way. So I next want to talk about accountability systems because accountability is really the key to getting any routine to stick. It's really easy to say that you're going to have a writing routine and then um, you come down with the flu and so you don't write and then you're catching up on your teaching work and then you've been working so hard, don't you need a break? And it's really easy for to fall out of routines, and that's totally normal. If you're watching this webinar, chances are you've set a writing routine for yourself at some point, and it worked for a while and then it didn't. uh, at least that's true for me. um, so the key, I think, is accountability. And one way to sort of hold oneself accountable is to write in groups. And that can mean a bunch of different things. Um, One strategy is to use online tracking systems. A group of faculty at my university, they just have a shared Google Doc or spreadsheet where they each like go in and make a check mark on the days that they write. So they never talk about it. They don't meet in person. It's not a writing group. It's just uh, everybody has to look and see that, you feel like you owe them something. You owe the spreadsheet a check. And those are really easy to set up and can work uh, really well as a kind of proxy writing group. Um, and sometimes you can meet in person and talk about your routines and the struggles you have with them. And that can be good to sort of build camaraderie and realize that your writing routine is not yours alone. There's something so lonely, I think, about writing, and uh, and we seem to do it in isolation. But meeting in person to talk about our routines and talk about our struggles with writing can be really helpful and make us feel less alone. Another strategy is to use social media check-ins. I just told you about my sister using Twitter. You can start a Facebook group or something just where people just check in and say that they wrote every day. That's really easy to use, and most people are on their social media anyway. So if you can, once the Freedom app clicks off, you can log on Facebook and say, "Yep, I talked for 45 minutes," or I wrote for 45 minutes. That can work. And then another strategy is to write actually literally in groups. This can be really helpful. I know a lot of writers who will meet at a coffee shop and we're all just going to tap on our computers and write for 25 minutes, and then we'll look up at each other and say, "Hey, we did it." So writing literally in groups can take away some of the loneliness, but it also gives you that accountability where people are looking at you and did you complete your writing? Um, uh, and then also another strategy for accountability is to join Ideas on Fire Grad School Rockstars or a similar program where where people are checking in regularly about what they're doing. So there are a number of programs online that you can pay to join that will have this accountability system built into it. And then finally, I just want to remind us to take ourselves as seriously as we take our students, our colleagues, our advisors, our dentists, our hairdressers, our yoga instructors, gym time, shows, meetings, everything else. Writing falls too quickly to the back of this list, and it really shouldn't. It's at the core of what we do as thinkers, and it can become pleasurable and making it routine, I think, takes a lot of the pressure and heat off of it. So these establishing an accountability system and just getting into a routine of writing and giving yourself a few weeks for it to work will really get you into the routine. And what you'll find at the end of that is that in spite of all your protestations, you got a whole bunch of writing done, and that's exciting. So I wanted to end with some other resources for thinking about setting writing routines. A lot of us write using the Pomodoro method. That's the website of the folks who came up with it, and they'll sell you a timer that looks like a tomato. And the Pomodoro technique is just to write in 25-minute chunks. Most of us can find 25 minutes in the day. Uh, Often first thing in the morning, 25 minutes you can find before you head off to your day, or 25 minutes of your lunch hour. And you can And just writing that 25-minute chunk, you can get a ton done. And you can use the Pomodoro method for other tasks as well. I use it for grading because I don't want to grade, so that's really helpful. Another resource that I find interesting is to read about the writing routines of other people. All kinds of people, every writer has their own set of strategies, and this is a website that does interviews with authors and creatives about their writing routines, which I think is interesting. We also have a lot of related content and ideas on FIRE, and I've just given you a few here, but if you look at our archives, you'll see we've got a lot about how to set realistic writing deadlines, how to get the most out of writing groups that can often help with our accountability and bolster our routines. And then we have recent blog posts on organizational tips for the end of the semester that I think is relevant here, because a lot of times what gets in the way of our writing routine is other work we have to do. And so organizing the rest of that can free up time for writing. And then also the Grad School Rockstars community can help you, encourage you to get in these routines. And then finally, I just want to remind you to set your routine and stick to it. And we are all that kind of writer. Be the kind of writer who sticks with their routine. All right, I'm going to end the PowerPoint now and come back and see what kind of conversation we might have together. All right. Hi. I'm back. So I'm looking now at what others have said. I journal every day and would like to transition to not working on weekends too. I wonder if journaling on weekends would help the routine to stick, even though it's not academic writing. I actually think that's not a bad idea, to at least keep yourself in that strategy. Oh, I think that idea of virtual writing is really helpful, to know that somebody else has done that. That's something we do in the Rockstars community a lot, where someone will come on and say, I'm palming right now. Anybody want to palm with me? And then we do that together. Sometimes I'll text my twin sister and say, tell me to write, and she'll make me write, and then I'll check back in with her. So are there other strategies that folks have used to keep themselves on in a routine? And thanks, Kyla. You're right, the flu sucks. Well, if no one has any other suggestions, I'll go ahead and end this webinar. But I just wanted to say, it's once you get in the habit, you're in the habit, and writing happens regardless. Ooh, Heather has a really good question. Finding a balance between writing and reading. I get stuck in reading a lot. So one thing that I do is I have separate palms for reading and writing, and I give myself I'll read for 25 minutes a day, and that'll be it. Which, by the way, is more reading than almost anyone in academia is doing, and that's, I think, kind of an ugly secret. But writing has to be the priority, and I always remind myself that writing is how I know things, not reading. So reading, it gives me some ideas, but then I've got to write. So I think part of it is figuring out what your priority is, and then setting your palms for writing and reading, and making sure that they're separate. Thanks for all the get well wishes. It'll happen. Thank you for those of you who had tips in the sidebar. I think that's a lot of really good advice. And I think if there are ways that we can make writing less lonely, that would really help me. So hopefully we'll find each other online for these strategies. Gail has a really good tip as well. Thank you, Gail. All right, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, but hopefully we will see you at our next webinar or at other Ideas on Fire events. And so wash your hands a lot, and have a great day, everybody. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.